My name is Cassandra Wilson, but everyone calls me Cassie. I'm 34, I live in Portland, and last Tuesday I learned there are moments that split your life cleanly in two, before and after. Mine came at 8:37 p.m. when I checked a lottery ticket I'd bought on autopilot and realized I'd matched all 6 numbers. $47 million. My throat closed. The room swayed. I sat very still on the edge of my thrift store sofa, clutching a slip of thermal paper like it was a detonator. When the initial shock ebbed, another feeling moved in, colder, clearer, precise. I would tell no one. Not my parents, not my siblings, not even my best friend, Charlotte. At least not yet. If that sounds harsh, it's because you don't know my family. Money in my world has never simply been currency. It's been performance, pressure, bargaining chip, and trap. Every we're family. Text has carried a price tag. Every favor turned into a tab. I learned to smile through it. To be the reliable one, the reasonable one, the one who could be counted on to make the spreadsheet balance, even when it meant unbalancing myself. Until that Tuesday, I lived an ordinary, outwardly functional life. I was an accountant for Asmol marketing firm in the city, the kind of place that commissions branded tote bags and swears this campaign is finally going to go viral. I made enough to pay rent on a modest one-bedroom on the far edge of Portland and buy decent coffee beans when they were on sale. Not enough to feel safe. Definitely not enough to stop that low-grade hum of anxiety that buzzed under everything. The car that rattled when it rained, the student loans, the rent notice that came too fast after payday. 60-hour weeks had stopped being busy season and become the baseline. I wore a good girl grin and kept the ledgers tight, while my boss, Arnold, floated through client decks, taking credit with the smile of a man who thinks teamwork means I talk while you do it. At 6 a.m., most mornings I'd grind beans in my old burr grinder, brew in a dented pour-over, and sit at my little table with the spreadsheet of my life. Due dates, balances, color-coded categories. I could tell you exactly which store had cheaper paper towels and which had irritating sale on oat milk. I could tell you down to the penny how much room there was after bills for anything resembling joy. I could also tell you none of that mattered when a surprise bill hit like a wave you didn't see coming. The people who raised me taught me 2 different stories about money. My dad, Gregory, earnest high school physics teacher with the world's biggest collection of novel tidies, preached thrift, amortization tables, and compound interest like scripture. 2 years after he divorced my mom, he married Stephanie, a real estate agent with perfect nails and a taste for granite countertops. Invest in experiences, she'd say, posting from Cancun, 2 weeks after Dad told me his roof had collapsed in a storm and needed a temporary loan. I sent him what I could. He sent me a selfie with a margarita. My mom, Diane, resourceful, organized. A woman who can host a Thanksgiving for 20 without breaking a sweat. Remarried too. To Warren, a businessman with a calculator where his heart should be. He has money. He has rules. His favorite sentence is, "That's not my responsibility. I'm the middle child." My older brother, Jason, 36, is the family's charming crisis. He never met a job he couldn't quit, or a relationship he couldn't sabotage. He is brilliant at apologies and terrible at follow-through. Borrowing money is his love language. The script is familiar. Sis, I really hate to ask. I'll pay you back Friday. Then silence until the next fire he accidentally set. My younger sister, Lisa, 30, is the golden child with the glossy highlight reel. Ivy League. A surgeon husband named Paul, 2 children who always look like they've wandered out of Aned for ethical knitwear. A house with a mudroom and a double oven. When she needed $2,000 to bridge the gap for her wedding, I put it on my credit card. "We'll reimburse you after the honeymoon," she said. We're still on honeymoon timeline, apparently. 5 years late. Then there are the satellites in our orbit. Aunt Heather, Dad's older sister, married rich and never lets you forget it. She keeps a running commentary on everyone's choices. My apartment, so small. My job, stable but uninspired. My relationship status. Have you thought about freezing your eggs? Her son Ryan is a walking cautionary tale with a gambling problem we all pretend is just bad luck. The other side is Aunt Martha, Mom's younger sister, an elementary school teacher who lives in a tiny apartment stuffed with books and pothos, plants she propagates in old jam jars. She drives a Honda that wheezes uphill and brings homemade scones to every gathering. She is, improbably, the thinnest person I know. Maybe now you understand why, when I say no one could know, I meant it with my whole body. Buying lottery tickets was my one frivolous ritual. $10 on Friday at Gus's Corner Market. My family teased me. Dad lectured about probability. Jason joked I should just give him the cash directly. Mom called it a tax on people who can't do math, but I liked the little bubble of hope it created, this harmless what if. That glowed for a day and then popped. Hope can be a meal when the budget's tight. I had dreams, of course. To travel without refreshing my bank app in a panic. To go back to school for something I love, not just something that pays. To have an emergency fund big enough that a flat tire doesn't spike my blood pressure. To live a life measured by more than coupons clipped and shifts covered. The day I bought the winning ticket was my 34th birthday. The week had been brutal. Arnold had stolen my idea in a client meeting with the timing of a pickpocket. He even used my phrasing. And Derek, my Teflon coworker, had ducked out early 3 days in a row. It stopped at Gus's as usual, but with a small act of rebellion. I handed over a 20. Birthday splurge, Cassie? Gus smiled, sliding the slips across the counter. Throw in one extra. For luck, I said. On a whim, I didn't do quick pick. I picked people. My birthday, 3/16, Mom's 12, Dad's 21, Aunt Martha's 9, and Charlotte's 30. The list made me feel tender and foolish at the same time. Love and disappointment share a front door in my family. I went home with pad thai, opened the bottle of wine Charlotte had given me, for emergencies or celebrations. You decide, and spent my birthday evening scrolling through other people's parties. At 8:30, I remembered the tickets and checked the numbers on my phone, expecting the usual small nothing. First, number 3, cute. Second, 16. Huh? Third, 12, my palms went slick. Fourth, 21. My chest tightened. Fifth, 9, I stopped. Breathing. Sixth, 30, I checked 3 times. Then I rewound the broadcast and watched the balls pop into place on my TV, one after another, like fate playing connect the dots with my life. My hands shook so hard I dropped the remote. No way, I whispered to the empty room. No way. The website said the jackpot was $47 million. After taxes, roughly $28 million. I'd spent the morning comparing laundry detergent prices. The universe had a sense of humor, apparently. I didn't sleep. I read everything I could find about sudden wealth. The disasters. The leeches. The cousins. You don't remember who remember you. The bankruptcies. The statistics about winners who end up worse off. The cautionary line repeated in different words. Money doesn't change people. It shows you who they already are. By sunrise, the decision was made. I would claim quietly, through a trust if I could, and I would tell no one until I had a plan. I called in sick for the first time in 3 years and made an appointment with an estate and tax attorney named Philip Montgomery in a glassy downtown building where the lobby smells like money and eucalyptus. I sat in the waiting room in my old navy jeans, palms sweating against my purse where the ticket lived in a zip pocket. Philip was in his 50s, kind eyes behind expensive frames. Miss Wilson? He said, offering his hand. I placed the ticket on his desk. I need to claim this without it becoming public. His eyebrows lifted, just a fraction, then smoothed. You've come to the right place. 2 hours later, my brain was buzzing and my shoulders, for the first time in years, had dropped an inch. In our state, I could claim through a blind trust. We talked about tax withholdings, about creating an advisory team, about investment vehicles that wouldn't send up lifestyle flares. The biggest mistake winners make, Philip said, steepling his fingers, is telling too many people too quickly. Once the toothpaste is out of the tube, it doesn't go back in, I finished. Exactly. I walked out with a folder of next steps and the strange weight of a secret that might save me or suffocate me. For 2 weeks, we built my second life. We formed a trust with a bland name. We opened accounts. We mapped a conservative portfolio. We set up a modest personal checking account for my regular bills and a separate one for the trust distributions that would look like a small inheritance, should anyone ever ask. I went to work like nothing had happened. I ate lunch at my desk. I carpooled with Derek one day when my Corolla wouldn't start in the rain. My heart did a weird skip every time my phone buzzed, as if the money might leak through the screen. The silence grew heavy. I kept catching myself composing the confession, not to my parents or my siblings, but to Charlotte, my best friend since sophomore year when we shared a dorm closet and a toothpaste brand. But each time I swallowed it. I needed to know what this money would do to the people around me before I let it do anything to me. That's when the idea arrived, quiet and stubborn as a seed. What if I could learn, really learn? Who would show up for me if I had nothing? What if I asked for help, the way they've always asked me, and watched who moved and who made excuses? I hated the deception, but I hated more the feeling that the moment I opened the vault door, I'd be the bank. I wanted to protect what I'd just been given. I wanted to protect myself. I started to plan. The idea burrowed deeper into my brain until it was no longer a question, but a plan. I would test them, not with millions, not with any grand gesture, but with a simple human request: help me when I'm down. If they said yes, I would know. If they said no, I would also know. I began drafting the story. It had to be believable, detailed, and small enough that no one would think I was fishing for sympathy. The truth is, I've always been the helper, never the one who asks. To reverse that role would already feel unusual, so I needed details to make it airtight. The scenario I built went like this. The marketing firm where I worked had collapsed suddenly after losing its two biggest clients. Rumors of embezzlement, all staff let go without severance. I'd applied for unemployment, but it would take weeks to process. I'd been on a few interviews, but nothing had materialized yet. In the meantime, I had medical bills piling up from recent tests. I left that vague on purpose. And rent looming. I rehearsed the ask in the mirror. I hate to ask this, but I need about $5,000 to cover rent and bills until I get back on my feet. I'll pay you back as soon as I can. $5,000 wasn't pocket change. It was enough to sting, but not enough to seem outrageous, especially for people who had come to me for equal or larger favors over the years. The night before I made the first call, I confessed the plan to Charlotte. We sat on my tiny balcony, drinking the last of the birthday wine she'd brought. "You're really gonna lie to your whole family?" she asked, her brow furrowing. "I have to know, Char. I've given until I'm empty. If they can't show up for me with just this, when they believe I have nothing, then why would I think they'd treat me differently if they knew I had millions?" She sighed, turning her glass between her palms. "It feels manipulative. What are you hoping to gain, Cassie? Validation, proof, clarity," I said. The word tasted right. "I'm done guessing where I stand. This will show me." She shook her head, half exasperated, half resigned. "You've already made up your mind, just be prepared. You might not like what you find. I wasn't naive." I'd already drafted predictions in my notebook. Mom, Diane. Maybe sympathetic, but Warren will veto any real help. Dad, Gregory. A lecture about responsibility. No money. Lisa, my sister. Too many expenses. New car, tuition, renovations. She'll say she wishes she could. Jason, my brother. Flat refusal. Masked as his own crisis. Stephanie, stepmom. Judgment. No assistance. Warren, stepdad. A blunt, not my problem. Aunt Heather, condescension. Possibly gossip. Ryan, cousin. Promise help, then ghost. Aunt Martha, likely the only one who will actually try. 10 people. 10 conversations. 10 answers. The next morning, I dialed my mother first. My heart thudded as I listened to the rings. "Cassie? You sound upset," she said when she picked up. I launched into my story. The sudden closure, the missing paycheck, the unpaid medical bills. She gasped at the right moments. "Oh, honey, that's terrible. Have you applied for unemployment?" "Yes, but it takes weeks. I don't know how I'll cover rent." I took a shaky breath, forcing the words out. "I hate to ask this, Mom, but I need $5,000 just until I find something." Silence stretched. I could almost hear her biting her lip. "Oh, Cassie. Warren and I just put a down payment on the lake house. We're cash poor right now. Maybe your father could help? Or Lisa. Paul makes such a good salary." I was hoping to avoid asking them, I murmured. "I'll talk to Warren," she said finally. "But no promises. You know how strict he is about money, especially when it comes to, well, yes, I knew. Translation, you're not his kid, so you don't count." I thanked her anyway and hung up, my chest tight. I wrote it down in my notebook, concerned but deflected. Likely no help. The following day I met Dad for coffee. He wore one of his novelty ties, little planets spinning around his neck, as if the universe itself might back up the lecture I knew was coming. When I explained my job loss, he frowned, folded his arms and asked, What happened to the 6-month emergency fund I told you to keep? Life happened, Dad, I said softly. Medical bills, car repairs. I couldn't keep it stocked. He sighed, shaking his head like a disappointed professor. Cassandra, this is exactly why I preach financial discipline. You can't expect others to bail you out when you haven't planned properly. I don't expect, I whispered. I'm asking. Just this once. We can't, he said finally. Stephanie and I are focused on retirement. It would be irresponsible to dip into those funds. This is a learning experience for you. My throat burned as I nodded. He patted my hand like I was a child. I scribbled in my notebook book later, lecture. No help, Lisa was next. I drove to her immaculate suburban home, where her granite countertops gleamed and her espresso machine hissed like a dragon. When I told her the story, she clasped my hand. Oh my God, that's awful. Poor you. But the moment I mentioned $5,000, her expression shifted. Oh, Cass, the timing is just so bad. We just bought the new Audi, the kids' tuition is due, and we're redoing the master bath. Paul handles the finances, and he's strict about the budget. I understand, I said, even as my stomach sank. Let me talk to him, she offered, eyes darting away. Maybe we could manage a smaller amount. Or you could move in with us temporarily. The guest room is storage now, but we could clear it out. I forced a smile. Thanks, but the commute would be tough with interviews in the city. I knew I'd never see that money. Sympathy, excuses, likely no help. Jason didn't even pretend. I texted him the story. His reply, that sucks, sis. Really tight right now myself. We'll call you later. He never did. Calls went to voicemail. Texts were ignored. No response. No help. Stephanie answered my call with her usual frost. Cassandra, I'm sorry you're struggling, but Warren and I aren't in a position to assist. Perhaps this is an opportunity to downsize or find a roommate. I bit back the reminder that I'd helped with their vacation cabin repairs just last year. That was different, she snapped when I hinted. That's family property you also enjoy. Enjoy? I'd been there once in 5 years. Blunt refusal. Judgment. When I tried Warren directly, he didn't even soften it. You're not my daughter. Your financial choices are yours alone. Perhaps you should have pursued a more lucrative career. I thanked him stiffly and wrote, cold, dismissive, no help. By then, the weight of disappointment pressed like a stone on my chest. Each call, each excuse, each lecture chipped away at my hope. But I still had more names on the list, and the one I dreaded most was next, Aunt Heather. Calling Aunt Heather was like willingly walking into a storm. She had always been the sharpest tongue at every family gathering, her words dripping with condescension no matter the occasion. I braced myself before dialing. Well, Cassandra, she said after I explained my fabricated situation. I always knew that company of yours was unstable. Didn't I tell your father you should have taken that job at the bank after college? But no one listens to me. Her words were exactly as I expected, cutting, dismissive, and laced with the smug satisfaction of someone who thinks misfortune is proof of their own wisdom. I just need some temporary help, I said softly. 5,000 until I get back on my feet. Heather chuckled, a sound that made my skin prickle. Cassandra, life is hard. We've all had to pull ourselves up at one point or another. I didn't marry into money by begging, you know. I married smart and I managed wisely. Perhaps this is a lesson you needed to learn. My cheeks burned, though she couldn't see them through the phone. So that's a no? It's a no, she said bluntly. And Cassandra, don't go making the rest of the family uncomfortable with these handouts. People have their own responsibilities. Running around asking everyone for help is unbecoming. The line went dead before I could even respond. My stomach twisted. Hours later, Lisa texted me. Heather says you've been asking everyone for money. What's going on, Cass? Word had spread just as I feared. Instead of compassion, my need was becoming gossip fuel. I scribbled in my notebook. Condescension. Gossip. No help. My cousin Ryan was next. He was Heather's son, and while he hadn't inherited her money, he had absorbed every bit of her entitlement. Still, I thought maybe, just maybe, he might surprise me. When I told him about losing my job, he sounded genuinely sympathetic. That sucks, Cass. Don't worry, I'll help. Let's meet for lunch. I'll bring a check. For a moment, my chest loosened. Maybe at least one person besides Martha would step up. We scheduled lunch for Thursday at a diner halfway between us. But an hour before, I got a text. Something came up. Rain check? I tried to reschedule. No reply. I called, straight to voicemail. Days passed. My texts turned into a string of unanswered bubbles. Ryan vanished as quickly as he had offered help. Empty promise. Ghosted. No help. By the end of the week, I was drained. 8 people on my list had either refused, deflected, or disappeared. Each conversation had left me more hollow than the last. Then came Martha. I hadn't even reached out to her yet when my phone rang. Cassie, honey, I just heard from your mom. Are you okay? Her voice was warm, full of concern. Not judgment, not gossip, just genuine care. My throat tightened. I'm hanging in there. Let's have lunch tomorrow. My treat. And don't argue. I agreed, my heart both heavy and hopeful. We met at a little diner near her apartment, the kind of place with cracked leather booths and handwritten specials taped to the wall. Martha hugged me tightly before we sat down. I'm so sorry about your job, she said, eyes full of worry. That company never deserved you anyway. We ate sandwiches while she asked gentle, thoughtful questions about my job search. She didn't pry into the details of my medical bills or scold me about savings. She simply listened. After the plates were cleared, she reached into her worn purse and pulled out a plain white envelope. Here, she said, sliding it across the table. It's $3,000. I know it's not the full amount, but it should help with rent. I stared at the envelope, stunned. Martha, I can't take this. You don't have that kind of money to spare. Nonsense, she said firmly. Family helps family. And if you need a place to stay to save money, my sofa pulls out. It's not fancy, but you'd be welcome as long as you need. Tears welled in my eyes. Real tears, not the ones I had rehearsed. Thank you. I don't know what to say. Say you'll be okay, she said with a smile. And don't worry about paying me back right away. Focus on finding a job you actually like this time. Life's too short to work where you're not appreciated. Her words sank deep. Martha had so little, yet she gave without hesitation. And in her giving, she offered more than money. She offered dignity, comfort, and love. I drove home with that envelope in my bag and a lump in my throat. In that moment, I realized the stark truth. The ones with the least had given the most, and the ones with the most. They had given nothing at all. But as powerful as that realization was, the story wasn't over. Because Martha's gift didn't just reveal her character, it forced me to confront my own. For the first time, I wondered, was I still being honest with myself? Or was this test crossing into something darker? That evening, I sat on my couch with the envelope in my lap, staring at it like it weighed 100 pounds. I had gotten what I wanted, proof. Proof that most of my family saw me as a burden, a nuisance or worse, a cautionary tale. And proof that Martha, with her modest teacher's salary and her rattling old Honda, was the only one who showed up without hesitation. But as I sat there, the guilt started to gnaw at me. I had lied, to all of them, to my mother, to my father, to Lisa, Jason, even to Heather, though she hardly deserved the truth. And most of all, I had lied to Martha, the one person who least deserved deception. She had handed me nearly all of her savings, no questions asked. $3,000 that I knew cost her far more than it would cost Lisa or Warren or anyone else in the family. I had seen her cardigan that afternoon, the one with mismatched buttons because she refused to throw away something that still kept her warm. I thought about her tiny apartment with its books piled in every corner, her second-hand furniture, her patched-up old Honda. And still, she gave. I placed the envelope on the coffee table and whispered into the silence, "What have I done?" The next morning, I couldn't take it anymore. I called Martha and asked her to come over for dinner. When she arrived, I set a cup of tea in front of her, my heart pounding like I was about to confess a crime. "Martha," I said quietly, "I need to tell you something. I haven't been completely honest with you." She looked at me with those kind, steady eyes. "What is it, honey?" I didn't lose my job. The company is fine. I made it all up, to test the family, to see how it would help me if I needed it. I braced myself for anger, disappointment, anything. But Martha didn't explode. She didn't scold me. She just sat back, thoughtful. I see. Are you mad? I blurted. She took a sip of tea, then shook her head. No, not mad. Sad, maybe. Sad that you felt you needed to test people this way. But I understand why you did it. This family hasn't always been kind to you. I felt my throat tighten. You were the only one who helped. Everyone else made excuses. Or worse. People show you who they are when giving becomes inconvenient, Martha said softly. It's a lesson I learned the hard way myself. What do you mean? I asked. She folded her hands in her lap and took a deep breath. You know how the family always says Robert and I divorced because we grew apart? I nodded. That was the story everyone repeated at holiday dinners. The truth is, when my grandmother died, I inherited $50,000. Not a fortune, but more money than we'd ever had. I wanted to save it for a house, for our future. But Robert, he wanted to invest in his friend's restaurant. I refused. We argued for months. Then one day I discovered he had forged my signature and withdrawn the money. By the time I found out it was gone, the restaurant folded within a year, I gasped. He stole from you? He did, Martha said, her voice calm but edged with an old pain. And when I confronted him, he told me it wasn't my money, it was ours. As if my name on the inheritance didn't matter. As if I was just a resource he had access to. I felt my stomach twist. I had no idea. No one ever said, because the truth was messy, she said with a wry smile. Easier to say we grew apart. But the truth taught me something. Some people will always see you for what you can give them, not who you are. Her words hit me hard, because wasn't that exactly what I had just uncovered with my family? I'm so sorry, Martha, I whispered. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Don't be. That was a long time ago. It survived, and I learned. But Cassie, remember this. Money doesn't just reveal who others are. It reveals who we are, too. How we use it, how we share it, how we let it shape us. The words settled over me like a blanket. She was right. I had been so focused on what money revealed about my family that I hadn't thought about what it was revealing about me. And in that moment, I knew I couldn't keep lying to her. Martha, I said, my voice trembling. There's something else. Something big. I need you to know the truth. She leaned in, her eyes gentle but alert. What is it, honey? I swallowed hard. I didn't just test the family because I was curious. I did it because 3 weeks ago, I won the lottery. $47 million. Her eyes widened, but she didn't gasp, didn't laugh, didn't call me a liar. She just watched me, waiting. I haven't told anyone else. Not Mom, not Dad, not Lisa or Jason, not even Charlotte until recently. You're the first family member I've told. For a long moment, Martha was silent. Then she whispered, That's life-changing, I know, and I didn't tell anyone because I didn't know how they'd react. I needed to know who would stand by me if they thought I had nothing. And you were the only one. Martha reached across again and took my hand in both of hers. Oh, Cassie, I don't need anything from you. Not a dime. Just knowing you're secure and happy is enough. Tears blurred my vision. But I want to help you. I know about your medical bills, about how hard you've been working just to make ends meet. You deserve more than that. You deserve to be comfortable, Martha. She smiled, soft and tired, but full of love. Sweetheart, all I've ever wanted is to see you happy. If this money can give you peace, then that's all I need, but I knew in my heart I couldn't just leave it at that because Martha had been the one to show me what family really meant, and I was determined that she would be the first to share in the life I was about to build. I left Martha's apartment that night with the weight of her kindness and the sharp clarity of my next steps. The irony wasn't lost on me. The woman who had the least had shown me the most. I wanted to make sure she never had to choose between medication and groceries again, and I wanted to do it in a way that preserved her dignity. The last thing I wanted was to turn her modest life into a spectacle. The next morning I called Philip and asked him to come over. We sat in my tiny living room, me in my thrift store cardigan and him with his legal pad, while I explained what he wanted. A trust, I said. Something stable, reliable, not a headline. Monthly support, medical expenses covered, and a small nest egg for anything she wants. But I don't want her to feel like charity. Philip nodded. We'll structure it as a discretionary family trust, he said. That way, the distributions are regular, but they don't arrive overnight in a lump that could feel overwhelming. We can set up a trustee, someone you trust or a professional fiduciary, to handle distributions so Martha never has to manage a large sum if she doesn't want to. We talked logistics, tax implications, naming the trustee, the level of access Martha would have to principal versus income, and gentle wording in the trust documents that framed this as a gift for comfort and dignity rather than a life-altering takeover. I wanted subtlety. I wanted her life to feel the same, only easier. The paperwork itself felt strange to sign. My signature on the trust documents felt like the beginning of a new life. Quiet, but irreversible. Philip explained the next steps. Finalize the trust, buy a house close to mine, set up a steady monthly stipend to cover meds and any extra comforts, and open a modest account for her to use without having to jump through financial hoops. You're doing the right thing, he said, though none of us could know yet how right it would feel. Within a month, we had a plan in motion. I bought a single-story craftsman not far from where I planned to move. 3 bedrooms, a small yard, wide doorways, for days when arthritis might flare. It wasn't a mansion, far from it, but it had sunlight in every room and a porch that begged for a rocking chair. The closing was quiet. I kept the folks at the title company anonymous and used the trust to transfer funds. Martha's reaction when I handed her the keys was as if I'd handed her a new song to hum. She cried. I cried. With that done, I turned my attention to the foundation. The idea had started as a small thing, a program that helped elderly people living alone with companionship, maintenance, and medical navigation. It had grown in my head into something more, a nonprofit that would connect volunteers with elders who were isolated, help with small home repairs, and provide short-term financial assistance for unexpected medical costs. I wanted to create an organization that treated aging with dignity, not pity. Setting up the nonprofit turned out to be one of the most unexpectedly joyful parts of becoming wealthy. I hired a small, fierce team. Charlotte agreed to come on board as Outreach coordinator, bringing her healthcare knowledge and quiet, practical compassion. I hired a part-time development director and a program manager who'd run volunteer programs for years. We incorporated, applied for 501(c)(3) status, and began partnering with local senior centers and community clinics. The mission was simple: provide practical help and companionship to seniors living alone, with a special focus on those estranged from family. I funded the initial operations out of my personal accounts, but set the organization up with a professional board and conservative investment guidelines so it could outlast me. Philip insisted on a separate foundation account and advised on endowment structures to ensure sustainability. My spreadsheets, once full of corporate budgets and client numbers, now modeled meal delivery routes and volunteer training schedules, and I loved the new kind of math. There were practical decisions to make, too. I didn't want every act of generosity associated with my name. The anonymity I had maintained while claiming the prize was now a policy. Much of the foundation's funding would be anonymous gifts. Not because I wanted secrecy for secrecy's sake, but because I had seen how sudden wealth can change hearts and agendas. I wanted volunteers to show up for the work and the people, not for the promise of recognition or a chance to curry favor. So I started small and discreet. A check wired under the foundation's name paid for a month's worth of home aids for an 82-year-old widow with dementia. An anonymous donation covered emergency dental work for a retired postal worker who'd been putting off pain. The stories that came back were humbling. The little quiet acts of relief, beds fixed so someone could sleep through the night, broken steps mended so a person could fetch their mail without fear, felt more life-changing than any flashy purchase ever could have been. Meanwhile, I kept seeing the family. Not in the way I once had, craving approval or validation, but with a new kind of detachment. The family calendar still required attendance at holidays, but the emotional cost had been negotiated. I set firm boundaries, no loans without contracts, no expectations that I'd be my siblings' emergency fund, and no more financial enabling. That clarity made the family interactions less charged. People who had expected access to a miracle now had to contend with someone who was both generous and uncompromising. I also made a decision about secrecy. For now, the lottery winnings stayed private. There was a power in choosing who to tell and when. It wasn't malice, it was prudence. I had seen what sudden exposure can do to families. Money didn't cure the family's lack of empathy. It amplified it. So I continued to wear my same cardigan to work and drive the same Corolla for a while. Not because I enjoyed the pretense, but because a slow reveal allowed me to build structures that would outlast the pomp and gossip. Still, even with plans and house keys and a fledgling nonprofit, the older, more complicated emotions didn't just vanish. Sometimes I caught myself scrolling through old emails, requests for help, the thank yous that never came, the promises that dissolved. They could have been moments to gloat. Instead, they were lessons. I realized the experiment had not just revealed others' characters. It forced me to confront my own patterns. How often had I sacrificed my financial health to buy peace? How many "I'll pay you back" promises had I taken as gospel? If anything, I had to be kinder to my past self. That meant making one more difficult choice. Anonymity didn't mean isolation. I wanted some connection with the family, but it had to be on terms that preserved my dignity and Martha's comfort. I began to open channels where the truth of my support wasn't broadcast but quietly felt. When my father landed in the hospital with a minor heart episode, textbook, frightening for him, manageable in the end, I paid the hospital bills through a patient assistance program. I arranged for Ryan to receive treatment for his gambling addiction anonymously. I covered a rehab program fee routed through a counselor he'd trust. There were risks in acting without attribution. Resentment simmered when people discovered help had arrived from nowhere and spun their own explanations. But on the days when I watched Martha garden on her new porch, or the smile that spread across the face of a widower when volunteers fixed his leaky roof, I knew those choices were right. One afternoon over coffee, Charlotte said something that stuck with me. "You could be the headline and the quiet hand," she said. "And you don't have to choose between them. You can be both." It was an odd kind of comfort. I could wield this money deliberately, publicly when it strengthened the mission, privately when it preserved dignity, and be guided not by drama but by what truly changed lives. The foundation grew. We hosted community dinners where elders brought stories and volunteers brought patience. We launched a small repair team that took on tasks most people consider too small to track on a city ledger, but too large for a single older person to manage. Word spread, not about me, but about the little nonprofit with big heart. And as the calendar turned a full year from the night I first checked the numbers, my life felt like a collage of choices I had made deliberately. A house with a mailbox that had my name on it, a neighbor who waved each morning, a nonprofit that had saved people from isolation, and a sister, Martha, whose laugh was the easiest sound in the world. The money had opened doors, sure, but the real change had come from the courage to set boundaries, to build quietly, and to choose generosity as a practice rather than a reflex. I still had to decide if I would ever tell the rest of my family the truth. Some days I thought, yes, let them learn and perhaps be better for it. Other days I preferred the field of quiet good I'd already planted. For now, I was content to let the work speak in ways that mattered. Roofs fixed, pills paid, company given. That night, after the Foundation's first anniversary dinner, Martha and I sat on her porch with slices of pie and 2 paper plates. Fireflies blinked in a lazy, knowing rhythm. She nudged my elbow. "You did good, kiddo," she said, meaning every part of it. The money, yes, but the lessons, the care, the boundaries. It felt like an absolution of sorts, and I accepted it gratefully. "Thanks," I said, and for once the word felt small and enough all at once. The weeks after the Foundation's first anniversary dinner were full of a kind of rhythm I had never known before. Each day had meaning that wasn't measured in billable hours or frantic deadlines. Instead, it was measured in roofs repaired, meals delivered, and laughter shared with people who had once been forgotten by everyone else. But beneath the calm surface, there were ripples of tension that never fully disappeared. Family tension. Word had spread among them, Lisa, my father, even Heather, that I seemed to be doing fine despite my supposed financial ruin. Some wondered aloud how I'd managed to bounce back so quickly. Others whispered that I'd exaggerated my troubles in the first place. None of them suspected the truth, of course. To them, I had simply landed on my feet with a new job in nonprofit management. And in a way, that wasn't a lie. I was working full-time at the Foundation, drawing a modest salary to keep up appearances. It was the perfect cover. It explained my stability without raising questions. Still, there were moments when guilt crept in. Family gatherings became a test of endurance. I would listen as Jason complained about his latest failed venture, as Lisa showed off pictures of her bathroom renovation, as Heather made another snide remark about people who can't manage their money. I would smile politely, sip my coffee, and remind myself of the truth. They had already shown me who they were. It all came to a head one Sunday afternoon. My mother called. "Cassie," she said in a voice tight with frustration, "we need to talk." I braced myself. "About what?" "About you asking the whole family for money. Do you know how embarrassing that was? Heather says you approached her like a beggar. Your father thinks you're reckless. And Warren." She trailed off. "Well, you know how he is." I clenched my jaw. "Mom, I asked for help. That's what family is supposed to be for." She sighed, exasperated. "We all have responsibilities, Cassie. You can't expect people to drop everything. Maybe it's time you grew up a little." The words stung, even though I knew they weren't true. I had grown up long before I should have, taking responsibility when no one else would. Emptying my savings for Jason, maxing out my card for Lisa, sending money to Dad while he vacationed. "I am grown up," I said quietly, "and I see things more clearly now than I ever did." We hung up not long after, the conversation unresolved. But something inside me had shifted. For the first time, I didn't feel the desperate need to defend myself or prove my worth. I felt free. That week, I met with Philip again. We sat in his polished office high above the city, Thesky line glowing in late afternoon light. "I want to formalize something," I told him. "An endowment for the foundation. Enough to keep it running for decades, maybe longer. Quiet, steady, sustainable." He smiled faintly. "You're thinking about legacy." "Not mine," I said. "Theirs, the people we serve. People like Martha who are forgotten until someone chooses to see them." He nodded, jotting notes. "We can set it up. You'll want a conservative investment portfolio, a governance structure, maybe even a succession plan." We spent hours discussing details. By the end, the foundation wasn't just a small nonprofit, it was becoming a permanent institution, a living promise that the money wouldn't vanish into excess or folly. When I left his office, I felt lighter. Purpose had a way of silencing guilt. Still, family shadows loomed. Jason showed up at my apartment one evening, unannounced. He reeked of beer, his smile wide but desperate. "Hey, sis," he said, throwing his arms around me. "You're looking good. Heard you're running some big nonprofit now, huh?" I stepped back uneasy. "It's going well. What do you need, Jason?" He laughed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Come on, can a brother visit without needing something?" I raised an eyebrow. Okay, he admitted. "It's just a small thing. 10,000. I've got this business idea importing specialty coffee beans. Huge market. Just need seed money," I shook my head. "No, Jason," his smile faltered. "No, just like that?" "Just like that," I said firmly. "I can't be your bank anymore." He stared at me, disbelief etched on his face. "Wow, after everything I've been through, after everything I've done for you." I almost laughed at the absurdity. "What exactly have you done for me, Jason?" His mouth opened, closed. He had no answer. Finally, he muttered something under his breath and stormed out, the door slamming behind him. I sank onto the couch, trembling. It hurt, even knowing it was the right choice. Setting boundaries wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Later that week, I had dinner with Martha. We sat on her porch, sipping sweet tea as the sun dipped below the horizon. "You seem lighter," she observed. "I told Jason no," I admitted. "He asked for money again, and I didn't cave." Martha smiled, pride in her eyes. "Good. Boundaries are love too, Cassie. Don't forget that." I nodded, letting her words settle. For years, I had confused sacrifice with love, obligation with loyalty. But I was learning slowly that true love, real family, didn't demand self-destruction. And the more I leaned into that truth, the freer I became. What I didn't realize then was that freedom comes with a price. Because secrets, no matter how carefully kept, have a way of slipping through the cracks. And soon, my secret would no longer be mine alone. It started with Heather, of course. It was always Heather. She cornered me at a family brunch one Sunday, her voice sharp enough to slice through the chatter. "So, Cassandra," she said, drawing out my full name like it was a scolding, "how exactly is it that you went from begging for money to suddenly running a whole foundation?" Every head turned. Forks paused midair. Even the kids fell quiet. I forced a calm smile. I found a job that pays better. That's all. Heather narrowed her eyes. A job that pays better? Don't insult our intelligence. I know what nonprofits pay, and it isn't enough to explain this. New lifestyle. She gestured around as if I were dripping in diamonds, when in reality I was wearing a $40 blouse from Macy's. Lisa piped up, her tone dripping with suspicion. Yeah, Cassie, how did you bounce back so fast? Paul and I have friends in accounting. None of them are getting better pay right now. Markets are terrible. My father cleared his throat. I agree. Cassandra, perhaps you owe us some transparency. We're family, after all. I nearly choked on my coffee at the irony. Transparency from me? The same people who'd turned their backs when I asked for help now demanded answers. I don't owe anyone here an explanation, I said evenly. My finances are my business. Heather's lips curled. Oh, so secretive. It makes people wonder what you're hiding. That was her way. Throw out poison and let it spread. I kept my expression neutral, but inside a chill crept up my spine. I had expected whispers eventually, but I hadn't realized suspicion had already taken root. That night, my phone buzzed with a text from Jason. Do you have something to tell me? I stared at the screen, heart thudding. Like what? I typed back, like how you suddenly don't need money anymore. Like how Heather says you've got some mystery income. My hands hovered over the keyboard. For a split second, I considered telling him everything, confessing about the lottery, the trust, the plan. But then I remembered the slam of my apartment door just a week earlier when I had refused him $10,000. I remembered all the broken promises. So instead, I wrote, I told you already, Jason. I have a new job. That's it. No reply came. 2 days later, Martha called me. Her voice was tight, concerned. Cassie, honey, I think you should know something. Heather is telling people you're hiding something big. She even hinted you might be involved in something illegal, I groaned. Of course she is. Martha lowered her voice. You need to be careful. Secrets have a way of making people hungry, especially people who feel entitled. Her warning clung to me long after we hung up. That weekend, Charlotte and I met for drinks. She leaned forward over the table, her eyes sharp with worry. You can't keep this hidden forever, Cass. It's going to leak. Families talk, someone will notice eventually. I know, I admitted, staring into my glass. But if they find out, everything changes. I'll never have peace again. Charlotte reached across and squeezed my hand. Then you need to decide something important. Do you control the story or do you let them control it for you? Her words sat heavy in my chest. Control. That was the heart of it. For weeks, I had lived with the illusion that my secret was safe. But Heather's probing, Jason's texts, Lisa's pointed questions, they were cracks in the wall. And cracks, no matter how small, always spread. The breaking point came the following month. I was at the foundation office reviewing a grant proposal when Charlotte burst in, phone in hand. Cassie, she said, her face pale, you need to see this. She held out her phone, screen glowing with a Facebook post. Heather's Facebook post. Funny how some people in this family go from broke to running charities overnight. Makes you wonder if maybe they stumbled into some sudden fortune? Lottery, perhaps? Hundreds of comments beneath it, family acquaintances, neighbors, even old high school friends, buzzed with speculation. My secret wasn't a secret anymore. It was gossip, spreading like wildfire. And once it was out there would be no putting it back. I closed my eyes, my pulse hammering. The question wasn't if they knew anymore. It was how I would respond. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Heather's Facebook post, her smug words, the endless comments, the growing storm of curiosity. By morning, my phone was a battlefield. Dozens of missed calls. A tidal wave of texts. Lisa, Cassie, is it true? Jason, why didn't you tell me? I'm your brother. My mother, Cassandra. I'm very hurt you kept this from me. Stephanie, we could have helped you invest properly. This was irresponsible. Even Ryan, my useless cousin, chimed in with, heard you came into some cash. Want to celebrate in Vegas? My treat. JK, but seriously, let's go. I threw the phone across the couch, my chest tight with panic. By noon, there was a knock at my door. Not just one, an insistent pounding rhythm that made the walls vibrate. I froze. Through the peephole, I saw Jason, shifting from foot to foot, his face tense. Cassie, open up, He called. We need to talk. I didn't move. My stomach twisted. Come on, sis. I just want to understand. I deserve to know, deserve. The word burned. I backed away from the door, heart hammering, until the pounding stopped. Minutes later, my phone buzzed with his text. You can't hide forever. That night, I met Martha at her house. She made tea, her hands steady even as she listened Tom rant about the chaos. They're circling like vultures, I said, pacing. Heather started it, and now everyone thinks they're owed something. They don't care how I feel. They just smell money. Martha sipped her tea quietly before speaking. Cassie, you knew this day might come. I wasn't ready. No one ever is. She set her cup down and looked at me with steady eyes. So what will you do? Keep denying it? Or face them? I don't know. My throat felt tight. If I admit it, they'll devour me. If I deny it, they'll call me a liar. Either way, I lose. Martha reached for my hand. No, honey. Either way, you choose. That's the difference. You can choose how much of yourself you give. You can choose your boundaries. They don't get to decide that unless you let them. Her words settled deep into me, like a seed planted in soil I didn't realize was waiting. 2 days later, my father called. His voice was clipped, teacher-like. Cassandra, we need to discuss your finances. I have experience with investments, and I think it's only right I guide you through this. We can't let you squander such an opportunity. Dad, I interrupted, my voice sharp. When I asked you for help, you gave me a lecture about savings. Now suddenly you want to manage my money? He hesitated, caught off guard. Well, that was different. You hadn't what? Won the lottery? Silence. You made your choice, Dad, and now I'm making mine. I hung up before he could reply. By the end of the week, it was undeniable. The secret was out. Heather had done her damage. Lisa showed up at my office, looking polished as always, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Cassie, I'm so happy for you. Really, I am. And the kids? They'd love to have private lessons, maybe a tutor for advanced math. It's so expensive, but you could help, right? It would mean so much to the family. I stared at her, the sister who had ignored my plea for help just weeks earlier. No, Lisa, I said evenly. I can't, her eyes widened. Can't or won't? Won't. The word landed like a slap. She blinked, her mouth opening and closing before she finally muttered, Wow, I didn't realize money would make you so selfish. I almost laughed at the absurdity. Selfish. After years of draining myself dry for them, when I told Charlotte what had happened, she nodded grimly. This is it, Cass, the mask ice off. They'll keep pushing until you put up walls so high they can't climb them. And you'll have to be okay with that. I don't want to lose my family, I admitted. You already lost the version you thought you had, she said gently. Now you get to choose what comes next. That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, realizing she was right. My family had revealed themselves in the harshest light, and now it was my turn to decide whether I'd stand in that light or walk away. The next morning, I woke up with a strange calmness, almost like my body had finally given up on the constant panic and settled into a different kind of survival mode. I brewed coffee, sat at my kitchen table, and opened my notebook, the one I had used to track every family member's response to my fake plea for help. I flipped through the pages, each one a record of excuses, dismissals, and empty promises. Now, I added a new column, post-lottery reactions. Mom and Di, Warren, defensive, worried about appearances, no actual support. Dad and Stephanie, lectures, sudden eagerness to manage my finances. Lisa and Paul, emotional manipulation, requests framed as for the kids. Jason, demands, veiled threats. Heather and Ryan, gossip, opportunism, entitlement. Martha, unconditional love, no expectations, genuine care. The list was brutal in its honesty. It stared back at me like a report card for my entire family. Later that day, I received an email from Heather. It was long, pompous, and dripping with self-importance. Cassie, I'm only reaching out because I care. Money changes people. You'll need guidance to navigate this new reality. And frankly, our family deserves transparency. After all, we've all been there for you in the past. Don't make the mistake of turning your back on us now. I read it twice, then laughed out loud. The audacity was staggering. Heather had never been there for me. If anything, she had been the first to mock me. Without hesitation, I archived the email. No reply, but Jason was more persistent. He began showing up uninvited, outside my apartment, at me office, even once at Charlotte's building. One evening, I caught him leaning against my Corolla, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. His expression restless. "Jason, what are you doing here?" I asked, exasperated. He smirked. "Just checking in on my little sister. Making sure you don't forget about family now that you're rolling in millions." My patience snapped. "Family?" I repeated. "When I begged you for help, you ignored my calls. Now you expect me to hand you money just because we share DNA?" He shrugged. "That's what family does. We help each other." "No, Jason," I said firmly. "That's what I did. I helped, you took, over and over again. But that ends now." His eyes darkened. "You'll regret this." I felt a chill, but I held my ground. "The only thing I regret is thinking you'd ever treat me like a sister instead of a safety net." I turned and walked away, leaving him fuming in the parking lot. That weekend, I drove to Martha's place. She greeted me with her warm smile, ushered mine, and insisted I try her new recipe for blueberry muffins. As I bit into one, I felt the tension drain from my shoulders. Martha's home was cluttered with books and plants, the furniture mismatched but cozy. Unlike every other family space, it wasn't a stage for judgment. It was a refuge. "I'm setting up a trust for you," I told her between bites, her brow furrowed. "Cassie, I told you I don't want your money." "It's not about money," I said gently. "It's about peace. You've spent your whole life giving to others. Let me make sure you're cared for, so you don't have to worry anymore. Please." She studied me for a long moment, then sighed. "You really are stubborn," I smiled. "I wonder where I got that from," she chuckled, finally nodding. "All right. But only if you let me keep spoiling you with muffins. Deal." Meanwhile, the gossip in the family grew louder. Lisa sent me long texts about how the cousins were whispering and how my secrecy was tearing the family apart. My father left me voicemails full of stern lectures about legacy and responsibility. And Heather? She doubled down on Facebook posts about how some people don't appreciate their blessings. It all felt surreal, like I was starring in a play I hadn't auditioned for. But the strangest shift came from my mother. One afternoon, she called me, her voice unusually soft. "Cassie, I've been thinking, maybe I haven't been fair to you." I froze, unsure how to respond. "I don't want money," she rushed to add. I don't want to lose you. Families fight, but you're still my daughter." For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of something unexpected. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, not everyone was beyond saving, but I also knew one thing for certain. From here on out, I was the one setting the rules. No more begging for scraps of affection. No more blind giving. Finally had the power to choose, and I wasn't going to waste it. The phone call with my mother lingered in my mind long after it ended. Her tone had been softer than usual, almost vulnerable, but I couldn't decide if it was genuine regret or just another attempt to pull me back into the old family dynamic. I had learned to be skeptical. Every apology in my family tended to be followed by a request, and I braced myself for the moment when hers would come. Still, a small part of me, a childlike, stubborn part, wanted to believe she meant it. The following week, I received an invitation to dinner at Lisa's house. She wrote in her usual bubbly style, "Cassie, we haven't had proper sister time in ages. The kids miss their Aunt Cassie, and Paul's making his famous steak. Please come, it'll be just us, no drama." I hesitated. I could already sense the real purpose behind the invitation, but curiosity got the better of me. When I arrived, her home was immaculate as always, smelling of rosemary and garlic. The kids ran to hug me, their little arms around my waist, their smiles genuine. For a moment, I almost forgot the tension. Lisa poured me a glass of wine, her face glowing with rehearsed warmth. "You look amazing, Cassie." "Money must suit you," I raised an eyebrow. "You mean my new job must suit me?" She chuckled awkwardly. "Right, the new job." We sat down at the long dining table. Paul carved the steak with surgeon-like precision, while Lisa talked animatedly about her kids' swimming lessons, their new kitchen remodel, and the private school fundraiser she was co-chairing. Finally, as dessert was served, she leaned in, lowering her voice. Cassie, I need to ask you something. As my sister. Here it comes. You know we've been expanding the house, right? The contractor gave us a higher quote than expected. We're short about $25,000. Paul and I were wondering. She trailed off. He's searching mine. Paul cleared his throat. We'd pay you back, of course. Interest too, if you want. But it would mean so much to the kids. They need their own space. I set down my fork. Lisa, when I came to you, all I asked for was $5,000. You couldn't help, remember? She flushed. That was different. Paul had just bought the car, and tuition was due. Exactly, I interrupted. You couldn't prioritize me when I needed you. And now you expect me to prioritize your luxury renovations? The silence was heavy. Paul's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Lisa's eyes filled with tears. I'm your sister, she whispered. Why are you being so harsh? Because I finally learned what family actually means, I replied calmly. And it's not this. It's not using someone when it's convenient and abandoning them when it's not. I stood, kissed the kids on their heads, and walked out, leaving Lisa staring after me, her fork frozen midair. 2 days later, Jason showed up again. This time he was more aggressive. Cass, we need to talk, he said, blocking my apartment door. Jason, I've already said no. He lowered his voice, but his eyes were wild. You don't get it. I'm in deep. I owe people money. Real people. Dangerous people. If I don't pay them back, they'll come after me. The old me might have panicked, might have reached into my dwindling savings to bail him out again. But not this time. Jason, I said firmly, you've been in debt for years. Gambling, bad decisions, excuses. This isn't my problem to solve. He grabbed my arm. They'll hurt me. I yanked free. Then maybe that's the consequence you need to finally change. His face twisted in anger. You're heartless. No, I said softly. I'm finally done being heartbroken. I closed the door on him, my hands trembling but steady enough to lock the deadbolt. That night, I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine, staring at the city lights. I felt both exhausted and strangely liberated. The lottery hadn't given me freedom because of the money. It had given me freedom because I finally had the courage to enforce boundaries. I thought about Martha, her tired hands sliding that envelope of $3,000 across the diner table. She had so little, yet she had given without hesitation. And she had asked for nothing in return, even after knowing the truth. The contrast was stark. I knew where my future loyalty would lie. The rest of the family could keep their excuses, their gossip, their entitlement. I was building something new, with Martha. With Charlotte, with the foundation we were planning. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was no longer surviving my family. I was outgrowing them, and that realization was worth more than $47 million. The following weekend, I hosted a small dinner at my new place, a house I had purchased quietly under the trust's name. It wasn't extravagant, but it was mine, a cozy craftsman with a garden and a little porch swing that creaked when the wind blew. I only invited 2 people, Charlotte and Aunt Martha. The table was set with simple white dishes and a bouquet of fresh tulips. As I stirred the pasta sauce, I caught myself humming. It felt strange to be content after weeks of drama, but in that moment, it was real. When they arrived, Martha hugged me with her usual warmth while Charlotte teased, "Look at you, domestic goddess." We laughed, sat down, and ate. The conversation flowed easily. No tension, no hidden agendas, just comfort. At one point, Martha put down her fork and looked at me. Cassie, I've been thinking. When you told me the truth about the lottery, I realized something. You've carried the weight of this family for too long. It's okay to set it down. Her words landed heavily. I've been trying, I admitted. But sometimes I still feel guilty, like I owe them. Charlotte leaned forward. Cass, they don't see you as a sister or daughter. They see you as air source. You don't owe them anything. You owe yourself peace. I nodded slowly, letting that truth sink in. The next day, the peace was broken. My phone buzzed with a string of angry texts from Heather. How dare you humiliate Lisa by refusing to help with her house? This family has always supported you, and now you think you're better than us? If you don't step up, don't expect to be included in family gatherings. I stared at the messages, almost amused. For years, I had been desperate to be included. Now the threat of exclusion felt like a gift. I typed one short reply. Thank you for making this easier. And then I blocked her number. Later that week, my father called. His voice was sharp, commanding, as if I were still a teenager. Cassandra, your behavior has been unacceptable. I raised you to be responsible, and now you're throwing this family into chaos. Lisa is upset, Jason is spiraling, and your mother is beside herself. You need to fix this. I took a deep breath. Dad, I didn't cause this chaos. I just stopped cleaning up after everyone else's mess. You're being selfish, he snapped. No, I replied evenly. For once, I'm being fair, to myself. There was a long silence before he said coldly, If you continue down this path, don't expect my respect. Something inside me broke free. Dad, I said quietly, I stopped expecting your respect a long time ago. And then I hung up. That night, I sat with Martha on her small porch. She poured us tea, the steam curling into the cool evening air. You know, she said softly, sometimes family isn't who you're born to. It's who chooses to stay. Look around, Cassie. Who's still here? Me, Charlotte. That's your family. Her words wrapped around me like a blanket. For the first time, I realized I didn't need my parents' approval. I didn't need Lisa's validation or Jason's gratitude. I already had what mattered. The following morning, I received an email from Philip, my attorney. Cassandra, the foundation documents are finalized. You are officially the founder and executive director of the Silver Circle Foundation. I reread the words, my chest swelling with pride. The foundation would provide companionship, medical assistance, and financial support for elderly individuals who lived alone or were estranged from their families. Inspired by Martha, it felt like the truest thing I'd ever done. I closed my laptop, grabbed my keys, and drove straight to Martha's. When I told her, her eyes filled with tears. Cassie, she whispered, you're turning your pain into something beautiful. And in that moment, I realized winning the lottery hadn't been the miracle. The real miracle was finally understanding my own worth and choosing to use it to build something lasting. The official launch of the Silver Circle Foundation came faster than I expected. Within weeks, Philip and his team had helped me establish everything legally, and Charlotte eagerly stepped in to manage outreach. Our first project was simple, offering free home visits and small repairs for seniors in our community. We hired 2 part-time coordinators, both retired social workers, who knew how to connect with people gently and without judgment. On launch day, Martha stood beside me as I unveiled the foundation's modest logo, a silver ring encircling a small light. The local paper even sent a reporter. As they snapped photos, Martha leaned in and whispered, I hope you know how proud I am of you. Those words meant more to me than any article or recognition, but family didn't stop trying to wedge their way into my new life. One evening, as I returned home, Jason was waiting on my porch again. His face looked worn, darker circles under his eyes than usual. Cass, please, he begged, his voice hoarse. I know I screwed up. But I'm drowning here. Just give me one chance. 10 grand, that's all I need to pay off the worst of it. I crossed my arms. Jason, you've had more chances than anyone else I know. And every time, you waste it. This time's different, he swore, eyes darting like a trapped animal's. I'll go to meetings. I'll get help. I sighed. Jason, I love you, but I won't fund your self-destruction. If you want real help, I'll pay for treatment, directly to the facility. But I won't hand you money, he blinked, caught off guard. You'd do that? Yes, I said firmly. But if you refuse, then that tells me everything I need to know. He didn't answer. Instead, he shoved his hands into his pockets, muttered something about strings attached, and stormed off. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty. A week later, Lisa invited me again, this time under the pretense of a sisters-only brunch. Her kitchen smelled of fresh croissants and expensive coffee. She greeted me with a strained smile. I'll cut to the chase, she said as soon as we sat down. Paul and I think it's unfair for you to keep all this success to yourself. You've always been the one struggling, and now suddenly you're ahead of us all. Don't you think you should share? I nearly choked on my coffee. Share? Yes, she pressed. Think about it. We're raising kids, keeping up a household, paying tuition. Isn't family supposed to lift each other up? I stared at her, incredulous. Lisa, when I was down, you couldn't even clear out a guest room for me. Now you think I should bankroll your lifestyle? Her face hardened. Don't twist this. I've always been there emotionally. You're the one pulling away. I stood grabbing my purse. No, Lisa, I'm finally drawing a line. And if that feels like I'm pulling away, maybe that says more about you than me. Her eyes flashed with anger, but I walked out before she could reply. That evening, I called Martha and told her what happened. She sighed. Cassie, people will always try to take from you when they think you have more than they do. The trick is deciding who deserves a seat at your table. Her words stayed with me. The next big step for the Silver Circle Foundation was hosting a fundraiser dinner. Charlotte suggested inviting some of my family to show them what you're building. I hesitated, but eventually agreed. Maybe seeing the work firsthand would shift their perspective. On the night of the event, I wore a simple navy dress, my hair pulled back. Martha beamed at me as she greeted guests. Charlotte buzzed around, ensuring everything ran smoothly, and E felt grounded. Then I spotted them. My parents, Lisa and Paul, even Heather. They arrived late, making a point of being noticed. As I stood at the podium to give my short speech, I caught my mother's gaze. For once, she looked uncertain, almost uncomfortable. I cleared my throat. The Silver Circle Foundation was born from a simple truth. No one deserves to feel abandoned in their most vulnerable years. Too many people are left to fend for themselves when family fails them. We're here to change that. The words were pointed, and I knew my family felt the sting. But I didn't look away. The applause was loud, genuine. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't performing for them anymore. I was living for me. After the fundraiser, I drove Martha home. The car was quiet at first, the hum of the tires on the asphalt filling the silence. Then she reached over, patting my hand. You were brilliant tonight, she said softly. The way you spoke, it wasn't just about the foundation. It was about you, too. You finally told your truth, I exhaled slowly. Did you see their faces? Lisa looked like she swallowed a lemon. Heather kept whispering to Dad, and Mom, she just stared at me like she didn't know who I was. Martha chuckled. That's because, for the first time, they saw you without needing their approval. That scares people who've always thought they had power over you. Her words sank deep. She was right. I hadn't realized how much of my life I'd spent bending, shrinking, and apologizing. Tonight was different. The following morning, my phone buzzed with a group text. It was from Heather. After last night, it's clear Cassie has no respect for family. Standing up there, making us sound like villains, it was humiliating. Gregory, Diane, Lisa, we need to have a serious talk about how to handle this before she drags our name through the mud further. I almost laughed. The dramatics were exhausting, but what surprised me was Lisa's reply. Heather, that's enough. Cassie's allowed to build her own life. Just because she doesn't hand us money doesn't mean she's against us. For a moment, I stared at the screen, stunned. Lisa had defended me? But almost immediately, Paul chimed in. Lisa, don't be naive. Cassie could solve all our problems if she wanted. She's choosing not to. That's betrayal. So Lisa's flicker of support was smothered by her husband's entitlement. I put my phone down. I wasn't going to argue in a group chat like a teenager. Later that day, Jason called again. This time, his voice was quieter, almost broken. Cass, I took your offer, he said. I checked into treatment this morning. For the first time in years, I felt hope for him. That's good, Jason, really good. You'll cover it, right? Like you said? Yes, I said firmly. But remember, Jason, this isn't a handout. This is a lifeline. Don't waste it, his voice cracked. I'll try. For once, I'll really try. When I hung up, tears surprised me. Maybe he wouldn't change. Maybe he would. But at least I'd given him a chance at something real. Something better than endless loans and lies. The foundation grew quickly. Charlotte secured partnerships with local clinics, and soon we were offering free health screenings for seniors. Watching the faces of elderly people light up as volunteers fixed leaky faucets, replaced broken steps, or simply sat and talked with them, it filled a void I hadn't known was there. Meanwhile, my family kept circling like vultures. One evening, I came home to find an envelope taped to my door. Inside was a handwritten letter from my father. Cassandra, I don't understand the choices you're making. You've always been intelligent, but now you're reckless. Family is legacy, and legacy is duty. You owe it to us to keep the Wilson name strong. Stop isolating yourself. Stop embarrassing us. Come home for Sunday dinner and let's talk like adults. I folded the letter carefully, slid it back into the envelope, and tucked it into a drawer. Not out of respect, but out of finality. It was the last piece of manipulation I'd accept. That weekend, instead of going to Sunday dinner, I went with Martha to a small flea market downtown. She laughed as we dug through crates of old records and mismatched teacups. At one stall, she picked up a delicate silver locket. "This looks like you," she said, pressing it into my palm. I opened it and found space for 2 tiny photos. "I'll buy it," I said immediately. Later that night, I slipped 2 pictures inside, one of Martha, one of Charlotte. My real family. And for the first time in years, I felt complete, but the peace didn't last long. The next morning, I received a call from my mother. Her voice was shaky. "Cassie, your father's furious. He says if you don't come to dinner next week, he'll cut you off completely." I almost laughed. "Mom, he's never supported me." "What's he cutting me off from? His lectures?" She was silent for a long moment. Then, in the smallest voice I'd ever heard from her, she said, "I don't want to lose you." For the first time, I wondered, was she starting to see the truth? Or was this just another ploy? I didn't answer. Not yet, because for once, the decision was mine to make. I didn't call my mother back right away. For days, her words circled in my mind. "I don't want to lose you." Were they genuine? Or were they just another tactic to pull me back into the cycle of guilt and obligation? Martha noticed my distraction over dinner that week. "What's on your mind, honey?" She asked, pushing her mashed potatoes around her plate. I sighed. Mom called. She said she doesn't want to lose me. Martha leaned back, her expression thoughtful. "And how did it sound to you? Like a mother afraid to lose her daughter, or a woman afraid to lose control?" I stared at my glass of water, the condensation dripping down onto the coaster. That's the thing, I can't tell anymore. The following Sunday, I decided to go. Not because I owed them, but because I needed clarity for myself. My mother's house smelled of rosemary and lemon as I stepped inside. She greeted me with a stiff hug, Warren hovering behind her with his usual disapproving glare. At the table, my father and Stephanie sat with their arms crossed, while Lisa and Paul whispered to each other, their kids tugging at their sleeves. Heather was there too, naturally, smirking like she was about to witness a show. Dinner began in silence. Forks clinked against china. Finally, my father cleared his throat. "Cassandra, do you understand what you've done? Standing in front of strangers, parading our private lives like some spectacle?" I set my fork down. "It wasn't about you. It was about me. About telling the truth." "Truth?" Heather scoffed. "You call that truth?" "It was humiliation." I turned to her calmly. "If it wasn't true, why did it sting?" Her face flushed. For once, she had no comeback. Lisa spoke up next, her voice hesitant. "Cassie, I defended you in the group chat. But Paul thinks—" "Of course Paul thinks," I cut in, sharper than I meant. "He always thinks he knows better. But Lisa, what do you think?" She looked at me, her eyes darting nervously. For a brief second, I thought she might finally stand on her own. But then she dropped her gaze to her plate. "I think maybe you went too far." Disappointment burned in my chest, but I wasn't surprised. Then Mom spoke, her voice shaking. "I didn't call you here for a fight. I called you here because I see now that I've failed you." The table fell silent. Even Warren froze, his mouth half open. "I've let my marriage, my comfort, and my fears get in the way of being there for you," she continued, her eyes glassy. "When you asked me for help, I should have said yes without hesitation. But I didn't, and that's on me." For the first time in years, I felt my throat tighten. "Was this real, Mama?" I whispered before I could stop myself. She reached across the table, her hand trembling. "I don't expect forgiveness, but I don't want to lose my daughter." Warren shifted uncomfortably, clearly unhappy with her vulnerability. But she ignored him. The dinner ended without resolution, but something had shifted. My mother had cracked open the door of honesty, even if the others remained firmly closed. On my drive home, I called Martha. "She admitted she failed me," I said, still stunned. "And how did that feel?" Martha asked gently, like I'd been waiting my whole life to hear it, I admitted. Martha was quiet for a moment before replying. "Then maybe there's hope for her. But remember, Cassie, hope doesn't mean obligation. You can love her without letting her drain you." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "I know. This time I set the rules. And for the first time, I truly believed it. The days after that dinner felt strangely calm, almost like the eye of a storm. My phone buzzed less. The group chat went quieter, and for once, I wasn't constantly bracing for a guilt-laden call. But the silence wasn't peace. It was distance. And distance, I realized, was a gift. Instead of waiting for their next move, I turned inward. I began pouring my energy into the nonprofit I had started sketching out with Philip and Charlotte's guidance. We filed the paperwork officially that month, the Wilson Foundation for Independent Seniors. Our mission was simple but powerful, to provide financial assistance, home repairs, and companionship for older adults who, like Martha, had been overlooked by society, or worse, by their own families. Martha cried when I showed her the official documents. "You're doing something beautiful, Cassie," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Something I wish I'd had when I was younger and struggling. It's because of you," I told her honestly. "You showed me what real generosity looks like." Meanwhile, Charlotte became the backbone of our outreach team. With her nursing background, she understood the medical struggles many seniors faced. She coordinated volunteers, partnered with clinics, and even recruited young nurses in training who wanted real-world experience. Our first project was fixing the leaking roof of a retired librarian named Mrs. Green. The gratitude in her eyes when she saw the repaired home reminded me why this work mattered. I thought I'd spend my last years with a bucket in my living room. Mrs. Green chuckled, clutching my hand. Now I can finally read without worrying about the rain dripping on my books. That moment lit something inside me. This wasn't just charity. It was transformation. But even as my new life blossomed, the old one tugged at me. Jason called again, this time with another once-in-a-lifetime business pitch. A food truck, he claimed. All he needed was a $10,000 loan. Absolutely not, I told him firmly. "Come on, Cassie," he whined. "You know I'll pay you back this time. You said that last time. And the time before that. And you never did." His tone shifted, bitterness creeping in. "You think you're better than us now? Just because you're playing Little Miss Successful Nonprofit?" I didn't even flinch. "I don't think I'm better. I just finally know my worth. And you can't buy into it with empty promises." Then I hung up. Lisa came next. She called me late one night, her voice hushed. "Cassie, I need to ask you something, but please don't tell Paul." I braced myself. "What is it?" Her voice broke. "We're drowning in debt. The new car, the remodel, the kids' tuition. It's too much. Paul won't admit it, but we're in trouble. I don't know what to do." For the first time, I heard real fear in her voice. Not judgment, not superiority, but fear. "I can't bail you out, Lisa," I said gently. "But I can help you figure out a plan. Budgeting, downsizing, maybe refinancing. I'll walk you through it, but I won't just hand you money." There was a pause, then a shaky laugh. I should have expected that. "You've always been the practical one." "Not always," I admitted softly. "But I am now, and for the first time, it felt like my sister and I were talking as equals, not as the golden child and the forgotten one." One evening, after a long day of nonprofit work, I sat with Martha on her porch, sipping tea as the sun dipped low. "You've come a long way." "Cassie," she said, watching me over the rim of her mug. I smiled. "Sometimes I think winning the lottery wasn't the miracle. The real miracle was finally seeing my life clearly." Martha nodded. "Money doesn't change who people are. It just strips away the masks." And she was right. The masks had fallen. And in the reflection, I found my truth. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for my family's approval. I was writing my own story, and it was just beginning. A year passed quicker than I could have imagined. The nonprofit had grown from a small, hopeful idea into something tangible, powerful, and far-reaching. We had expanded our services to 3 neighboring cities, built a team of 25 employees, and managed over 200 volunteers. What started with Martha's inspiration had blossomed into a movement. I often thought about the irony of it all. My family had turned their backs on me when I needed them most, yet their betrayal had pushed me toward building something bigger than myself. Despite the growth, I remained cautious. My financial advisors kept reminding me, steady investments, steady life. But sometimes late at night, when the quiet pressed too heavily against me, I thought about the other life I might have lived. The one where I told everyone about the lottery, reveled in their sudden admiration, and handed out checks like candy. that life would have been hollow, I realized. It would have been built on lies and greed. The one I chose, quiet, deliberate, grounded, was harder. But it was real. My mother called again one afternoon, her voice timid. "Cassie, I was wondering, could we have dinner? Just the two of us?" I hesitated. The memory of her apology still lingered, but so did decades of disappointment. "Dinner," I repeated. "Yes," she said quickly. "No, Warren. Just me," I agreed. We met at a small Italian place in the city. She looked older than I remembered, her hair streaked with gray, her makeup less polished. For once, she didn't try to fill the silence with small talk. "Cassie," she began after the waiter left, "I've been thinking about that night, the one where you told us the truth." I was ashamed. Not of you, of myself. I blinked, unsure what to say. I should have been your safe place. And I wasn't. I was too wrapped up in my marriage, in appearances, in money that was never really mine to control. And I let Warren dictate how I treated my own daughter, her eyes filled with tears. "I want to do better, if you'll let me." For years I had imagined this moment, imagined what it would feel like to hear my mother take responsibility. And now, faced with it, I felt lighter. "I don't know if I can forget everything," I admitted. "But maybe I don't need to. Maybe we just start from here," she smiled weakly. "I'd like that." The rest of the family, though, remained unchanged. Heather still dropped snide remarks at holiday gatherings. Jason still circled with his schemes. Lisa and Paul continued their endless cycle of spending and stressing, but the difference now was me. I no longer measured myself by their acceptance. Their judgment slid off me like rain on glass. One weekend, I hosted a community dinner for the seniors our nonprofit had been helping. The room was filled with laughter, with the smell of home-cooked meals, with the warmth of people who knew how to appreciate even the smallest kindness. Martha sat beside me, her face glowing as she chatted with a retired teacher and a widower who'd just joined the program. As I looked around, I felt a deep certainty settle in my chest. This was my family. Not by blood, but by choice. When the speeches were over and the plates were cleared, Martha leaned toward me. "You know," she said softly, "the lottery didn't change you. It revealed you. The person you were always meant to be." I squeezed her hand, my throat tight. Maybe she was right. Maybe the greatest win of my life wasn't $47 million at all. It was finally learning who I was and who I wanted to be. The nonprofit's second anniversary arrived with little fanfare, but I felt an overwhelming sense of pride as I stood at the podium in our modest community center. The room buzzed with energy, volunteers, seniors we had helped, local businesses that had donated, and even a few city officials who had started taking notice of our work. I spoke about the journey, from one repaired roof for Mrs. Green to hundreds of seniors supported across multiple towns. But more than the numbers, I talked about the stories, about Mrs. Patel, who had been too frail to carry groceries until we paired her with a volunteer who now shopped for her weekly. About Mr. Alvarez, who hadn't spoken to anyone for months after his wife passed, until our outreach team visited him with coffee and chessboards. The audience clapped, some even teary-eyed. And in that moment, I realized something profound. I had become the person I had always wanted to be. Not rich, not admired by family, but purposeful. Still, the old wounds resurfaced now and then. Jason tried again, of course, this time with a sure-thing investment in cryptocurrency. He cornered me after a family barbecue. "All I need is $15,000, he pleaded. "Come on, Cassie, you know this will blow up. We'll both be rich." "I already am," I said evenly, meeting his eyes. "But you'll never touch a cent of it. Not until you start valuing people over profits." He glared at me, muttering something under his breath, but for once I didn't feel shaken. Lisa, on the other hand, surprised me. A few months after our late-night talk about her debts, she called again. "Cassie, I took your advice. We sold the Audi. We canceled the kitchen remodel. The kids are moving to public school next year." Her voice trembled. "It was hard. Paul's furious. But I couldn't keep living like that," I smiled to myself. "That's a brave step, Lisa. I'm proud of you." For the first time, it felt like maybe she was breaking free of the gilded cage she'd built around herself. Meanwhile, my relationship with Mom grew steadier. We had dinner once a month, no Warren, no distractions. She still stumbled sometimes, asking questions that bordered on invasive. offering advice I didn't need. But she tried. And for me, effort was enough. One evening, as we walked out of the restaurant, she stopped me. "Cassie," she said softly, "I don't deserve another chance. But thank you for giving me one anyway." I hugged her, not as the child desperate for her mother's approval, but as a woman extending grace. At home that night, I sat with Martha, sipping chamomile tea. "You know what's funny?" I said. "If I had told them about the lottery right away, none of this would have happened. They'd all still be pretending. And I'd still be wondering who actually loved me." Martha chuckled. "Sometimes the best way to see the truth is to test it. Painful, yes, but freeing." I nodded. I think I finally believe that. The foundation, the repaired relationships, the boundaries I'd built, it all pointed to one truth. The lottery didn't just give me money, it gave me clarity, and clarity, I realized, was worth far more than millions. The third year after winning the lottery came quietly, without the fanfare or chaos I might have expected. No champagne on yachts, no tabloid headlines, just me, waking up in a modest house with a life I finally understood and controlled. By then, the nonprofit had touched over 1,000 lives. We had volunteers across the state, partnerships with local hospitals, and a steady stream of donations from people who believed in what we were building. I no longer worked alone. I led a team of people as passionate as I was about dignity, respect, and care for the elderly. And Martha? She thrived. Her health had improved dramatically with proper treatment and less financial stress. She still lived near me, still filled her days with tutoring and her beloved books, but she carried herself with a lightness I had never seen before. Sometimes I thought to myself, if the lottery gave me freedom, it gave Martha peace. My family remained complicated. Jason eventually stopped calling, at least as often. I think he realized I meant it when I said no. Lisa and I grew closer, though. She started visiting without Paul sometimes, bringing her kids along to see me and Aunt Martha. I noticed the sparkle in her children's eyes when they helped us deliver meals to seniors. Maybe, just maybe, a new cycle was beginning. Mom kept trying, and I kept letting her. Slowly, painfully, we stitched together a version of a relationship that worked. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. As for Dad, Warren, and Heather, well, some people never change, and that was fine. For the first time, I didn't need them to. Looking back, I realized the real story wasn't about $47 million. It wasn't even about betrayal or revenge. It was about discovery. I discovered who my family really was when the masks fell away. I discovered that love can't be bought or begged for. It has to be given freely, like Martha had always done. I discovered that money doesn't make you. It reveals you. And if you're not ready to face who you really are, it can destroy you. But above all, I discovered myself. So when people ask me, because they do quietly, when they catch whispers of my success, what's it like to win the lottery? I smile. It's not the money that changes you, I tell them. It's what you choose to do with it, and who you choose to become once you finally have the freedom to decide. And that, I think, is the truest jackpot of all.